I want to tell you why I think everyone here should try to kind of look out there and see what other technologies maybe you're excited about in high school, or like what are your university friends working on, where your particular skills are very needed, and that I think could bring a new wave of really exciting innovation coming from Poland. I think there's a lot to do, but I think I'm very excited where like the Polish tech industry could be heading in the next 10 or 20 years, and I want to show you why. So I'm Seth's partner in the fund. I'm from here. I was involved with Hive earlier. You probably, I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. These are some of the companies I was involved in. Took part in YC, and then at some point moved to San Francisco. And I had a personal existential crisis and questioning of like 10 years around 10 years in the industry, like is the sort of there is a limit to the hype, and I think part of the startup hype was that it's exciting, it's new, it's going to enable us new things, and at some point when you're sort of doing the same things, that's not true anymore. So you start questioning if the reasons why you're working the tech are still there. And I started looking around, and one of the realizations that I had is like I want to contribute to solving big problems, and I have some skills, which is the key concept here, that can actually help. And some other people who have complementary skills might need my skills. So Impact.tech is the community that we started in San Francisco that's combining people in tech and many Y Combinator founders, many people who are at early stage companies, later stage companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and that are excited about this idea of creating purpose with profit. And when we started, we didn't fully know what that's going to be. And the first year we spent doing events around different verticals. Let's say space technology, clean energy, food technology, clean chemicals, like different areas where we thought, oh, maybe technology and commercializing scientific innovation could lead us to creating something qualitatively new and something that could actually change the world for the better. So that was a very big learning curve, which if you're even thinking about aligning yourself with impact, you should assume that there's going to be a learning curve for you, and you might need to sort of look into some of your old academic notebooks or some online education courses. So we started Impact.tech there. There are a few cities in the world where there might be Impact.tech events happening for a while. We sort of ran it. We decided we don't want to grow it too much because starting up an investment fund and making 29 investments is actually a lot of work, as it turned out, for a small team, and understanding all that. So soon we will probably start growing Impact.tech as a community and onboarding more people there. So, but just so you know what that is. And 50 years, Seth told you about, it's a small fund. We're based in San Francisco, work with some of the most amazing founders. Somehow we are able to invest and support founders that are many times smarter than us and are doing amazing things, but yet there's some piece of our experience that is applicable to them. So that's 50 years. And to kind of start the story from a different angle is we are excited about the world, but when you look at different types of impact investments you can be doing and different types of project you could be engaged in, there's always the possibility of getting engaged in something fairly local, right? Like opening an organic bakery is probably good for a small radius of people around it. But the question is, if you work in tech and if you have the skills that can help scale something to a country scale, to a Europe scale, to the global scale, wouldn't it be a better use of the skills? And the reason why I think everybody should think, like, how big is the impact that I could have with my skills, or of the skills I can learn, is because we live in exciting times, but we also, like, when you look at the different graphs of, I'll go through the graphs later, but we have some terrible things going on, and it's not like we have solutions for them. And like the news we hear about, like the human population growth and the uncontrolled use of resources and the temperature rising, is actually, they're real things happening. And because these are exponential curves already, it's we think it's too small, and we don't have the time to think of local solutions. Like everybody who can and who thinks intellectually capable and they want to work hard should be thinking about the most impactful solutions to those problems. So, you know, that graph causes this graph to be correct. So this is the question. Here's the big question: how to solve those global and accelerating problems when the solutions we've been using are failing, and we don't see systemic changes coming from the government, and we don't see systemic changes, enough systemic changes, positive changes coming from other places. So technology can map this graph. When you think of I'm sure there are many more examples, but just the most obvious ones. When you think of the advancements in semiconductors and wireless communications and the impact that it had on the way we access information, this is exactly the types of graph we're trying to map. Like this is not an example of a very impactful technology, even though I'm sure Mike will make a point that for people who are displaced and for refugees, mobile telephony is an extremely impactful tool. So there is a lot of nuance in the world. But again, exponential problems require exponential solutions. And Seth talked about some of the companies we've invested in. So I was going to go through a few as well. But just to give you some more examples, when you think of continuously and non-invasively monitoring disease through a contact lens in your eye, and that tells you which, you know, like which biomarkers are with which range, in which range. For people with any sort of disease and any sort of chronic disease, this is a life-changing invention. Skin patches that can do that with microneedles and microfluidics. Again, very different technology, similar impact on people's lives, people who need to live with the disease. And actually, Poland has many medical device startups. So if you kind of look at what your friends might be doing, there is a lot of activity there. And then again, different types of processes to make industrial chemicals in a totally new way. And this might not seem like a typical startup area. You're thinking, oh my God, like why would I ever go into industrial chemicals? But the fact is, these are huge markets. We use those things every day. And there might be some team working on Agiech on something, and they have no idea about raising money. They have no idea about preparing a pitch deck. They have no idea about sort of positioning themselves to be an investable company, but you can tell them, hey, listen, come join the startup community, and and those companies in the next 5 years or in the next 10 years should be some of the biggest companies coming out of Poland. Animal products without killing animals. Again, we looked at cultured meat. We have also invested in a cultured leather company that's making actual real leather straight from cells, and also products such as gelatin. So many different areas, and UJ has a tissue engineering department, and there's actually so much opportunity in that space for designing bioreactors, cultivators, sensors to monitor what's happening with those cells, information processing for all that. There's software, hardware, and wetware applications that need to, and companies that will need to exist, and that we would happily invest in, that will be multi-million-dollar opportunities, often billion-dollar opportunities. So I think you should start looking at some of those companies as well. And again, satellite, the satellite company that Seth mentioned. So I think I already pointed out that why you should be excited about deep tech, because I think you have the skills that could complement a lot of academic research and help commercialize it and build the sort of new, exciting startups that could be coming from Poland. You could contribute, in terms of impact, you can contribute to mapping in a positive way some of those growth curves, right? You could think of a problem and think of, like, you know, there's this problem in the world, like why do we only try to fix it in some small way currently? Why don't we eliminate it completely? And if you start thinking about elimination instead of step improvement, you can actually no, not only get very excited about some of the opportunities there, but also find a huge business opportunity. And if you build something from here, one of the big problems of scaling a startup from Poland is that, yes, there is great development talent. Yes, there are people who are smart and excited and well educated. But if you build a product, I believe often it's just very hard to compete when you don't have great business development somewhere in the United States or somewhere globally. There just isn't enough technological differentiation. But when you're working on exponential tech and something really, really hard, and where the biggest problem is actually making it, the markets are there, the problems are there. There's probably going to be somebody who buys it. So I think it significantly lowers the barrier of business development and sales challenge that currently the companies from non-US, non-Canada, and other sort of privileged startup markets have. And yeah, it feels great to be working on something important. If right now you can design your career for the next 10 years, like why wouldn't it be something that you really personally care about and that you will be excited in the morning when you wake up to put 10 hours towards? So this is sort of more on the soft side. But when you think of why the time is now, the compounding of research and technological advancement has allowed costs of hardware innovation and biotechs to drop, and they're going to be dropping significantly over the next few years. So if you want to start working on something that's harder, yes, it requires a little bit more upfront capital, but the cost will be dropping. And if you can find a good way to survive the first few years, you might enter a greenfield market with no competition, right? So there is right now, and there are some great funding programs in Poland. I know that there's going to be a new wave of VCs. There's already established players such as Innovation Nest, and I know they don't just do software, they also do hardware. Some of that, right, software plus hardware plus sensors. So a bunch of things that could actually be very impactful when you think of anything for agriculture, where this is also another market. And there's going to be more funding coming into those directions. There's actually, in just the conversations that I have with Polish VCs, they want to be investing more in medical devices, in biotechnology, in medicine, in robotics, in things, in clean tech, in energy cells, in nuclear energy, if you can design small nuclear reactors for every home, right? So, and the things that Seth talked about, it will be easier for you to get talent, get press. It will be easier for you to get the message out and hire the best people. And I think the final thing is IP. We're intellectual property, so sort of being able to patent your innovation. It's not ideal that the intellectual property markets work like they work right now, but that's how they work. And I would say it's another advantage of some of those startups, because if you have something of value, you can actually protect it. And if you have scientists who have something of value and they have protected it, but they have no idea how to commercialize it, you can help them. You can make sure there's some business opportunity there, and you can actually change their life and make sure that IP does not die in the university and it sees the world, and it's an exciting startup and it's an exciting success story for this market. One more thing you do have to do, it's going to be a lot of work. You have to do your own due diligence when you're thinking of like, what are the areas that I could contribute to? What are the research teams that I could join and I could support them with my business skills? Often scientific research is risky, and sometimes some things are not easy to replicate, and there are more dependencies than just in code. So hardware is already harder than software, but wetware and dealing with atoms, not just with bits, actually has more volatility. So you have to. There's another risk there. Some things will just not be right, so you have to sort of educate yourself before jumping into something, which I think it's kind of exciting if you like learning. And understand the market you're entering, and understand where the cost curves are going. And by the cost curves, I mean how expensive will be the lab consumables, how expensive will be the robots, how expensive will be the hardware. Depending on what you choose, you actually have to do a bit more research for, how does that business, it's different than software, but there is a learning curve, but it's not a learning curve that's not impossible to overcome. Not all scientists make good co-founders. I think many of them, because they're genuinely intelligent and they learn, but everything that the academia teaches you sometimes makes you less risk averse. So, and often that might not make for a great startup co-founder, but sometimes that's where some of you will play a role, where you help them with taking some on that business risk and some of that confidence. So it's still, the sort of rules of matching with a great co-founder are still the same. You need to know the people and you need to feel confident and you need to have a good communication. Yeah, and one of the things we look at, and I don't think Seth spent too much time talking about it, is even if you're thinking of solving a huge global problem, it's important to know what your year 1, year 2, year 3 is, right? Your year 1 might be R&D, and that's why you raise money, but as you have to know that there is some market that's going to pay you a premium initially for to allow the cost to go down. And just to make it more sort of practical, let's say the cultured meat company, right? Like eventually they will be in every Alma and in every Żabka, right? And it will be cheaper, healthier, no animals killed, the same product, no antibiotics, no stress hormones, not genetically modified, just cultured cells essentially. But initially, it's expensive and it's a novel food, so they will be selling through expensive restaurants to make sure their business and the flows of money into their account follows the scaling process of the technology once they build bigger facilities. So you'll have to do some math on that, but I do think it's very exciting. And then there's always going to be software and there's always going to be hardware and there's always going to be hiring and HR and operations and marketing and communications, and so many other skills that you already have that many researchers just don't. And you might be the best thing that has happened to them if you find people who want to commercialize something. So I think that's it for me. I do think there's going to be a lot of really exciting hard tech companies coming out of Poland, and I'm very excited for that. And I encourage you to try to go to different meetups around biotech. I know there is Meet Bio in Krakow. I know there are some academic meetups around robotics and around different types of, just have to ask which technologies interest you, and then try to bring some of those people here so that they learn sort of some business skills. And I think some great things will be coming out of that as a result in the future here in Poland.